handout which has been sent to all of you on the class discussion that we had. So there is a distinction between scaling analysis and dimensional analysis. So this is the most important confusion that usually arises in minds of students when one is trying to do scaling analysis for a given particular problem. So suppose we are talking about a quantity called mechanical force. Okay, and all of us know that one way of relating mechanical force would be inertia, which is represented by mass, and acceleration. And therefore, if we are asking for dimension of force, that we know would be mass into acceleration. So mass into length per time square. Length per time square would be the like dimension of acceleration. Just to tell you, acceleration is also written as d2x by dt2. So that is second derivative of position with respect to time. So therefore, in the numerator you have length, in denominator you have time square. So this is the typical kind of dimensional. So if we say dimensions, right? However, when we are doing a scaling analysis, then we have to understand which physical quantity are we assuming as the relevant scale parameter. Okay, so in our case, like we have been scaling with respect to, so the scale parameter is length, right? Because we are trying to see how, as a function of length, uh, things are being scaled. So it's like asking a question that if I am looking at force required to push a cube, right? Cube, or push a particular mass. So mass could have been, it could be a cubic shape, could be a spherical shape, could be any odd shape, right? So like what would be the force required to push that uh, cubical shaped object or an odd shaped object, uh, as the case may be, and then ask a second question that suppose now I increase the size of this object. Okay, so as if like when to begin with it was a cube of side 1 meter, and now I am making it as a cube of side 4 meter. So how would the force required to push it will change? Okay, that's the kind of question we are asking in case of like scaling analysis. So if with respect to length, so here if length is essentially measuring the dimension or the side of the a particular object, then we know that the mass scale as cube, because as L increases, the volume is going to increase, and assuming that the density remains constant, indeed density is going to remain constant. So therefore mass goes as length cube and acceleration as length, right? So therefore force is going to scale as length to the power 4. So if you make a comparison between say A, which was a pure dimensional argument, and B, which is telling us how force scales with length, right? They are they are distinct. So A and B are distinct. Okay, so this is something which has to be kept in mind. Okay, you cannot afford to not know it. Fine. So now let me just try to show you like an interesting picture, which I would try to like help you from the and try to say strength scales with bone bone length, right? And what I would say is I would actually try to show you something which is uh, yeah, ultimate strength of our. So let's focus on this specific bone, which is in marked in red, right? So this is called the femur bone. And now as you go across like species, right, from one species to another species in different sizes, let me just see, yeah. So, so this specific bone, you can imagine it has a given length, right? And now let me just try to see if we have a suitable image which really helps us with yeah, body weight versus bone strength. Let us see. Yeah, I think this one. Because I just wanted to body mass and proximal limb bone proportions. Yeah. So that's another. So there are many such plots. I am looking for a specific plot which I do have in a different device, but I would not like to change that at the moment. So let's go ahead with specific image. Okay, so here you can see that one has plotted body mass as a function of the femur circumference. So we just saw a bone, which is here, like say on the left side. On the left hand side, you can see a picture of a femur bone. So that bone will have a given circumference, right? So what has been plotted is trying to look at body mass as a function of circumference, femur circumference. And when we say like there is a scaling law obeyed by this, so these are kind of experimental data. Experimental data as in like individual masses have been measured for individual organisms, right? And then also the circumference of the femur bone is measured. And then that is plotted on a log scale. Fine. And you see that for different types of organisms, irrespective whether you are in the less than 20 kg or greater than 20 kg regime, or less than 50 kg, greater than 50 kg regime, or for less than 100 kg and greater than 100 kg regime, right? So that all scales linearly. Okay, and there would be an exponent. So suppose if we are seeing this as a number like 7 from say something like 2 to 7, right? So along the y-axis at the bottom plot, like the third panel, if you focus on the y-axis we have the maximum number as 7, and somewhere around if we imagine the minimum number as 2, then the difference is 5. And if we are trying to kind of roughly estimate the slope, then along x-axis it is like 2.8, 2.8, right? Roughly like 2.7. So zero point 0.2 here, 0.1 here, and then it is -1. So 1.8. So this is like 5 divided by 1.8. Fine. So the number turns out to be, the slope turns out to be 5 divided by 1.8, which is around, say, close to 3, right? Close to 3. So therefore, what one actually goes into is, so say suppose we are talking about a plot like log of circumference by log of mass, right? So it actually followed a kind of straight line distribution about which a lot of data points were distributed. So if we recall the data which we just now saw, it is something like that, and the slope, that is d log mass by d log circumference is nearly equal to 3. Fine. So that is the slope of this line. So suppose if we say that mass goes as some constant times circumference to the power n, then log m n log c, right? And essentially from this kind of a scaling law, you would be able to estimate what is n. Fine. So even experimentally, when we look around, we find that such scaling law very much in, and that helps us in a manner that, like suppose whenever we are designing, uh, say suppose one has to design a robot of a given mass, and it has to design a robot in a manner that it will stand on its own feet. Fine. So if we have knowledge of this scaling law, then depending on the mass of our design, we would be able to already predict what should be the length of the femur part of the robot that we are designing, because like that would most likely lead to the most optimal design, right? So therefore, kind of scaling analysis are very useful. So let's see example 1. Right, this was related to mass versus femur bone, right? Like there could be an interesting example like how does how does death rate, right, scale population size for COVID-19? Okay, so already experimental data has started arriving. Huh? So one should be able to tell how kind of death rate scales with population size. So any guesses for you? Like suppose population doubles, should death rate double? I'm asking a question. Like
Not
how do you
necessary, sir.
so how do you imagine this death rate to scale with population?
Is the death rate have a exponential curve?
Yeah. So like the question is very precise. Like suppose we have to try to estimate how death rate scales with population. So would it be an easy question to answer, a difficult question to answer?
It's proportional to square.
Proportional to square. Why?
Square of
Why
the because it increases rapidly.
it increases rapidly?
Rapidly.
Rapidly. Okay. Okay. I have a question. I have a call from a student of this class. Let me just take that. Huh? Hello. The link is on WhatsApp group. Okay. So okay, just hold on. Just hold on. Yeah, okay. So, like, how would it scale? Can you make a guess? So let's look at the data. Find out that there are more parameters which have to be worried about. So, say suppose we are saying COVID-19 death rate versus population density. So there's a very interesting data which exists, and it's almost a vertical straight line. Okay, so let's see, with a lot of distribution, lot of spread, but there will come to interesting questions. Okay, so can everyone see this image?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now can you figure out like how the death rates are, say on the x-axis, there is number of people per square kilometer. So that is population density. Fine. So there are regions which are high in population density, and then on the y-axis, and there are regions which are low on population density. And on y-axis, there are confirmed COVID deaths per million population. And if you look at India, so you will have to look along a line which is somewhere around 50, right? So 50 deaths per million. So वहाँ पे कहीं इंडिया मिलेगा 50, 55, 50, 60, something like that. And if you go along that x-axis, right? So around this, right, you can find that India indeed is here. India is somewhere here. It has a death rate somewhere around 50 to 60 per million, and its population around in the kind of 900 to something around 800 900 per square kilometer. So now the question is, like, if we have this kind of a spread of data, right? I am coming to like I am raising this question just to make sure that you understand the implication of this when we are talking about muscle strength. Okay, because there may be various parameters depending on the species, depending on kind of the type of like genus like whether it is an arthropod, whether it is a kind of whether it is something which lives inside sea, something which is on land all the time, like mammals, right? So depending on differences, these scaling laws may become very different. So in this example, you can figure out a scaling law by asking, say, countries with a given GDP. Okay, so if you can say per capita GDP, if you try to figure out per capita GDP of all these distributions, right, and then try to find out like how do population scale, like how do confirmed COVID death scales with population density, then you will start seeing these linear relationships. Okay, otherwise you will not be able to see this linear relationship. Say, for example, suppose we are kind of comparing China with some other country, right? So that has to be done based on like not only its population density, but also on the level of development. But at the same time, it would make sense if we try to make out how much money the country spends on medical infrastructure, right? And at the same time, it is also important that how prone that country is to various types of epidemics in past. Okay, so if you are, for example, trying to club India with some of the countries which have kind of had similar incidences of such epidemics in past, then that would be a better way of really doing a scaling with respect to population density. So you are seeing such a wide distribution and no scaling law in this picture, just because of the reason that there are additional parameters which are not separated, not cleaned.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for example, now say a good parameter would be that what would be the like if you are comparing COVID deaths as a function of population density, then you must compare between countries which have had similar incidences of epidemics in past. So for example, if we compare India and Bangladesh, right, that would be a much better like scaling scenario which will lead, and that will tell us a much better number. Say if you look at like a country like Singapore, right, which has a very large population density, but then the healthcare measures are very good, and then not only that, but also the per capita spending on healthcare is also very high, plus like incidences of such epidemics in past have been very low. So although people have been less immune, but then their measures at containing epidemics have been the best. So therefore, if you compare a country like Singapore and maybe a country like New Zealand, right, you will get a better scaling law. Okay, the bottom line law. So here the caveat basically, so caveat or limitation is that scaling law can be applied or I would just mark it as similar systems. Okay, so for example, like say when I say similar systems, say when you are comparing human beings, right, for a given scaling law. So then like say suppose their height, weight versus height, right, and try to see whether that follows a scaling law or not. So you will have to club together non-diabetics. Okay, if you try to include people who are suffering with diabetes, then they will follow a different scaling law for the same mass versus height. Okay, whereas like suppose if you are putting athletes together, then they will follow a very different scaling law. When you are putting healthy individuals in general from population, they will follow a different scaling law. So scaling law has its own limitation, and therefore like it has to be taken with that kind of a understanding. Able to make some of the points across. So I would be sending a problem set. Like I'm still trying to collate the problem. So therefore, like I have not sent it as yet. But once you attempt all the problems from that problem set, this will become much more clear. The kind of applications that you need to do becomes much more clear. The thing that you have to remember is there has to be parameter with which you have to scale. So in this case, that parameter is length, right? So that you have to identify. And then scaling law is not same as dimensional analysis. So that you have to understand. You have to understand that for similar systems, you cannot pick up dissimilar systems and try to find out similarities or try to find out a scaling law over there. So now the next thing that I wanted to kind of bring to your notice was our discussion last time in last class of, see, we were trying to, yeah, so we were looking at, yeah.
I had a question in the
Yeah,
beginning, or I am
yeah,
not
please
getting
tell.
how the charge scales as L square.
How charge scales as length square. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So let me just come to that.
Same question.
Is it the same question?
Okay.
Sir, basically problem how to scale length, charge,
Hmm.
and any quantity, other quantity of dimensions.
Okay, good. So,
I think, sir.
so here the
Sir?
question is regarding charge Q, right?
The charge Q is equal to sigma A. So A means area. The A is proportional
Right.
to L square. That means Q is proportional to L square.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But what they are asking or what they are confused about is it could also have been a volume charge distribution, right?
Or
It could
also
have
linear
been a
charge.
linear charge distribution.
Yeah.
Okay. So here the kind of problem that we kind of look for is say a spherical shell, right? Interacting with another spherical shell. So now if you like put charges on it, so these charges are only going to lie on the surface. Like whether we put negative charges or positive charges, they are going to lie on the surface. And when when charges and then charge will go as L square. But there is also a scenario that charge, say we are talking about a nanotube, say. So, and over here, the charges may actually lie along the length. So, here could be charges and in that case, like Q will rather go as, so let me Just try to erase this. Q goes as L. Right, so depending on the scenario or the exact physics problem at hand, these scaling laws will change, of course. Yes, so Pradosh, your question is very much valid, and like whatever was discussed or alluded to in the main class was considering a given scenario, right? Considering a given physical scenario, and over there what we had assumed was the charges would be distributed on the surface. So then Q will go as L square. So in general, when we are considering like typical electrostatic problems, right, charges would in general distribute, and when we are talking about say like microscopic features. So in that sense, like let's imagine that what we were talking about was if you recall again from the perspective of accelerometer, if you recall, right? I did mention accelerometer somewhere in the actual class, and there we were charges being set up on these surfaces. So fingers basically. So I would rather and like whatever I have drawn right now is a typical capacitive MEMS structure. So see, it's a very kind of varied class, so I don't want to get into too much of a detail right in the beginning, but I would like to allude to different types of problems that you may come across. So it is a typical capacitive MEMS structure where you can imagine these are over, say, the typical sizes. The length scale here is about, say, so this much would be about 10 micron. So scale, this length is about 10 micron. So you are talking about objects which are separated by, so these fingers which are about maybe 30 micron in length and then separated by a given spacing. And then what is happening is because of the movement, say one of them could move with respect to other. Say the proof mass is attached to the object which is on right through some other additional arrangement. So this could be some additional arrangement, and then here it go to 2, say proof mass, right? So when I say proof mass, it's a very heavy object. So whenever say that heavy object accelerates in a given direction, so the direction of acceleration could be this, right? So in that situation, what will happen is these fingers will move with respect to the static. So this one is a fixed. So this is a fixed part, and this one is a moving part. Okay, and movement direction is, so this is kind of the movement direction. So this one is the movement direction. So in that situation, what will happen is the capacitance between these fingers will change, and that would be sensed. And that will tell us how much was the displacement, how much was the acceleration, and so on, and how much was the jerk, the third derivative of displacement. So based on that, the electronics calculates. So in this case, the charges are going to be distributed on the surface here. And the relevant scaling law would be L square rather than, like for charge, Q will go as L square instead of the volume. Okay, so depending on these charges, like may have different types of variation. Is that clear? Right. So scaling law does not mean that there is one fixed recipe for all problems. It's like, given a particular physics problem, you will have to identify the relevant scale, and then depending on the nature of the physics problem, you will have to find out the scaling law. The advantage of finding out a scaling law is multifold. So it kind of gives you a way. So advantages, if we say, having a scaling law.
About magnetic force and surface tension, sir. In my case, magnetic force is direct proportional to L to the power 4, sir.
Okay, I will come to that. Let me just point out the advantages of having a scaling law. So of course, one is, so please mute yourself. Whoever is this? Oh. So like in a given physics problem, there can be many parameters, but if you find a scaling law between a set of parameters, then the number of parameters can be reduced, and then it provides a direct insight into experiments. Or like data. So suppose you are solving an optimization problem, but in that optimization problem, if you have been successful in finding a simple analytical scaling law, right? So that's much more advantageous than churning out a lot of numbers. Okay, so that's the typical advantage of scaling law, like typical advantages of scaling law. So now there was a so again, you will have to see what kind of a surface, what kind of a physical scenario you are considering. In general, if we say, so another example. So in general, S is like force per unit, force per length. Right. So now you can imagine surface tension in terms of like what would be how we're going to pull. Say, suppose if you are applying surface tension to pull two surfaces together with the help of a intervening fluid medium, then you will have to look at this problem in a particular manner. And over there, when you are talking of force, force is basically again going as mass times acceleration, which actually goes as L to the power. Mass goes as L cube and A goes as L, so this goes as L4. So therefore, surface tension will go as L cube. Right, force per unit length will go as L cube. Whereas, suppose we were talking of dimensions of surface tension. So this was force per unit length, so mass length per time square. So it was only mass per time square. So it is very different, like from a dimensional analysis point of view. So that you would have considered a simple scaling law. Okay, so there was surface tension It's something else also. Say magnetic force, right? So magnetic force, again, you will have to imagine what kind of a magnetic force you are considering. Say, suppose if you are considering the force on a charged particle in a magnetic field, then that will go as QVB, right? Whereas suppose you are talking about magnetic force between two current carrying wires, right? So then there it would be very, very different. The one current carrying wire will generate a magnetic field, and then the other wire would get attracted or repelled depending upon the sense of the current. So therefore, like, what I want to say is these scaling laws are very much required to be derived based on the exact physical scenario that you are looking at. So there is no one medicine for all diseases. Fine? Is that fine? Okay. So now let me just kind of try to move to
Last question. Sir,
Tell
is
me.
there a concept that for scaling analysis, the system must be uniform?
A system must be uniform. Okay, so here again, when we say scaling analysis, we are talking about something which is, and that need not, like, when we are saying that scaling analysis has to be like exactly valid, right? So there is no such uh, like, okay, so let me try to explain this with an example. So
Sir, I have
suppose
a confusion due to this fact. Suppose, sir, whenever we are considering the mass term, okay,
right,
rho into V, the density. Suppose, sir, the mass is not uniformly distributed, then rho is not a constant, but it will also be a variable of
right. So in such scenarios, scaling analysis have to be considered with appropriate knowledge of this variation. Okay, and a conventional, like a typical scaling analysis may not work. Okay, it has to be figured out how, say, mass is distributed in thinner sections than in larger sections, or like we are not really talking about scaling analysis and such scenarios. So when I said, like, I have been very precise in defining it. So let me recall. Let me just try to tell you. I had mentioned that it has to be in kind of, like, I have used a word like similar
systems.
Yeah, similar systems, right? So that is a crucial phrase. Okay, fine.
Okay.
So let's not spend more time on this at the moment.
Okay, sir.
The reason being very simple, that this is one of the insights which gets developed gradually. Okay, so what we'll do is we may come back to the scaling analysis idea when we are looking at a class of partial differential equations for a given physics problem. Okay, and then in such scenarios, what we will do is we will try to find a PDE which can be written in dimensionless form. Okay, so we will have to choose suitable scaling variables so that we can write the same PDE in a dimensionless form, and then the solution must scale with a given dimension in a particular form in addition to its solution, its like functional form obtained from solving the dimensionless form. Okay, so in such scenarios, we'll come back to just hold on. So in such scenarios, we'll come back to the scaling analysis idea once more to illustrate how that provides useful insights. Okay.
Sir, in that class, you told that the surface tension scale says L.
Only
Surface
L.
tension scales as L in which scenario? So surface tension was force per unit length,
Yes, sir.
right? So
Yes,
if
sir.
force is scaling as say L to the power 4, then surface tension will scale as L cube. Okay. So I don't recall which circumstances I talked
Actually,
about while.
handout, so you have connected it.
Oh,
So
it's not clear,
yeah,
Pradosh. Can you say again? Can you tell again?
actually there was a mistake in your handout.
Okay,
So
that's
surface,
possible. That's
yeah,
possible.
you
That's
have
possible. That's
corrected
very
it
much
in
possible.
next class.
That's very much possible. I may have corrected it.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
I have left the meeting, so let us wait a few minutes till he rejoin. All right.
Yeah. Sir. Sir, you are not audible, sir. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Please tell me.
Now audible. Now audible.
Okay, we were talking about surface tension somewhere. Surface proportional to volume. Yeah. Okay. So here I will specify this in actual homework. So this is for a with given constraints. So this will become more clear when I give you that homework. Okay. So that L to the power 1 dependence is for a very specific scenario. Okay. So this will go in general it will go as L to the power cube, but it could go as L to the power 1 with given constraint. So I understand this problem. Okay, fine. So like
Sir,
there would
what about the magnetic force? Because I was getting scaling law as L to power 4 in that case. Hello?
just hold on. So you were talking about magnetic force, right? Hello.
Yes, sir.
So again, like when I am saying that like there would be an acute dependence, right, or a specific dependence. So that would be based on a specific physical problem. So what I asked you was, like, can you tell me in general what would be the magnetic force going as? So even in this in general scenario, you will have to cook up a particular problem, right? So nothing is a right or a wrong answer. depending on the exact problem, right, there would be a right answer or a wrong answer.
Sir,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, sir.
Hello.
Sir, what I am thinking that in different situation, scaling law is different.
Yes, of course. It has
So,
to.
am I right, sir?
Yes, you are right. You're right.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Fine. So
Magnetic
that's
induction
what.
varies with length, sir.
Hello.
Hello. Sir,
Yes.
how magnetic induction B, capital B, varies with length, sir? Whether it is
Varies
L
with-
or L
No,
to
so
the
again depends on whether you are choosing a flat coil, kind of
No, sir.
very wide coil.
Choose by its simple formula, sir. Mu 0,
Huh.
B equal to I dl sin theta by S square. Whether you have
Right.
to take dl as constant or it to be varies as L with
No,
L.
so exactly. So it will depend on specifying the problem, right?
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
your case, if you specify the problem in a particular way, you can propose what is the scaling law. Okay, so what is happening is correct, right? So the thing that all of you are bothering about how it is really working is the right approach of going forward. Okay, and wait for the homework assignments, like which would be sent to you. At the moment, I had just asked you to like do some kind of a scaling analysis based on whatever you understand, right? For a specific case that you cook up. I would be sending you a homework sheet which will specify these problems in a very particular manner, like the constraints would be given, and then the scaling law will change. Okay, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Raj, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Sir, hello. Sir,
hello. Yes.
Sir, in quantum mechanical dimension, in like Planck's time scale, on that dimension, scaling law is different. Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Who is this? First, tell me.
Sir, Raj. Hello.
Raj, again, so that's the same thing I'm trying to say. Like, depending on the exact problem, the scaling law would be different. Right? And when I say exact problem, I am talking about considering a set of similar systems, right? With a given set of constraints, and then you talk about the scaling law for such systems.
Thank you very much.
So the advantage in this case, for example, would be that suppose you understand how gallium arsenide works, right? Say in a semiconductor scenario, then you would be able to tell how aluminum gallium arsenide works, how maybe similar 3-5 semiconductors or 2-4 semiconductors work, right? So all of them would fall in a class. Okay. And why this is important? Because in general, as like practicing physicists, we would like to cluster things into similar classes, and each class will follow a given scaling law. Okay, for a given phenomena. So that's the spirit in which we are discussing it.
Hello, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please tell me, who is this?
Sir, Saurabh, sir. Hello.
So your voice is not clear, first of all, so let me just mute everyone else, and then you can unmute and yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes, tell me.
Sir, I am Saurabh, sir. So my question is related to the standardization of fundamental quantities.
Okay.
So in the problem, we have said that H defines a kilogram.
What defines a kilogram?
Planck's constant H.
Planck's constant defines a kilogram. I would like you to explore and tell me how it does that. Okay, so I have left it intentionally open-ended. I have not already sent you some handouts,
yes, sir.
right, which you have to read and try to find out how that happens. Okay, this is so. Let me tell you, some of the which are put to the class are intentionally put saying that some of like you people will work out the solutions It is not going to be a scenario where everything would be spoon fed. I would be strictly against spoon feeding each small detail in due course of time, because we are teaching a PhD class. Okay, and good that you have raised this question. That means you have at least identified that that question had to be bothered. So now a lot of your classmates will also start bothering how Planck's constant is really determining or becoming a scale of determining mass. Okay, but indeed you are right. So this IUPAP, they really came up with Planck's constant as the like constant, which if you know, then you would be able to find fundamental like mass unit. Okay, so you will be able to standardize kilogram if you know precise value of H. That's right. But the question is how, and that I would urge all of you to find out. That is also one of the problems in the homework sheet you will be getting. So you will be getting a tutorial sheet, right, where all the problems have to be solved. So first all of you will attempt it, and in a later tutorial class we'll come back to it and discuss it. Okay, so now I wanted to discuss something more, and that was related to, so is the screen visible? Right, last time we formulated a physics problem for a set of spring mass system, and then talked about like quantities like eigenvalues and eigenvectors. So there are like some background which needs to be developed for that, but I see it's already 11 o'clock, so I would kind of maybe close this session because there have been no questions in this part. But has everyone gone through this class notes once, and what are the questions here?
Hello, sir.
Yes, please tell me.
One question, sir. In harmonic oscillator question, x1 is greater than x2 or x2 is greater than x1?
Oh, so that can be anything, right? That can be anything. So at the moment, these are only x1 and x2. So depending on an actual scenario, say suppose what I can do is, we have written this pendulum mode and breathing mode, right? In this, at the bottom, we have written a given vector v, a ket v, as some constant times pendulum ket and some constant times breathing ket, right? So say suppose I am just drawing a picture here, and okay, so corresponding to whatever is already here, already drawn here, like suppose I now draw a scenario in a manner that this was our dashed line and this was our dashed line, right? So it's always possible that the mass 1 is here and mass 2 is here. Right, so in this case, for example, your x2 would be this quantity and x1 would be this, right? On the other hand, you could also have had situations like okay, so in this case, x2 is larger than x1, right? So these are what? These are typical time snapshots, right? So when you are looking at the motion of these two masses after oscillation is set in, so at a given time, say t equals to t1, you may see a scenario which is like this, and at a different time t equals to t2, you may come across a scenario which is very different. So x1 and x2 are functions of time, and it is not necessary that x1 will always be greater than x2 or vice versa, right? Any of them can be greater than other, and they just vary as a function of time. The important thing is when you are writing x1, x2, which is the ket vector v, that can be written as some linear combination of the pendulum vector and the breathing vector. That is, we had just found out the pendulum mode and breathing mode. So pendulum mode was 1 by root 2. So it would be like alpha by root 2 1 1 plus beta by root 2 1 minus 1. Okay, so the important realization was now alpha and beta would be a function of time, right? And they will actually tell us at a given time t1, depending on what is the picture here, what would be alpha and what would be beta. Is that clear?
Clear, sir.
Right. Okay.
Hello,
And
sir.
we will come to how we talk about these eigenvalues, eigenvectors in more detail in next class. Okay, because
Hello,
that's
sir.
where the linear algebra will take off with this
Hello, sir.
physics problem. Yes, tell me.
Sir, I have a doubt that how would you write these equations mx1 double dash is equal to minus k1 x1 minus
Who is
k1.
asking? Who is asking?
Sir, Rishabh.
Rishabh. Okay, very good. So Rishabh, in another 5 minutes, I will be asking all the physics students to leave, and then because there are some very basic physics laws which I start talking, like if I start with harmonic oscillator, very basics, it would be too boring for the physics students. But for 4 of you, it would be relevant. So I will discuss that. Okay, I had already told. Yes, tell me.
Sir, as per this basis, you have only done the ortho normality condition. Does it also obey the quantum mechanical condition, mean orthogonality condition?
No, see, first of all, it is orthonormal. And what do you mean by orthogonality? Can you tell me? When you say orthonormal, first of all, it is normalized, right?
Yes, sir.
And they are independent modes. As soon as we say they are independent, they are independent, and there's nothing quantum about it. Even classically, that is valid. Okay, so in this case, suppose we are talking about, so let me tell you what he's asking. So for that, we need to add a page to it. I'll just add one page to it. So maybe add new page. Okay. What Rahul, right? Rahul asked this, right?
Yes, sir.
So what we just now saw was, if we are looking at EP, right? So this should be normalized, right? That means, so EP was given as 1 over root 2 1 1, right? So therefore EP is transpose conjugate of this, which is going to be 1 over root 2. Sorry, what am I writing? One over root 2 1 1. Right, so I hope everyone understands this symbol dagger, which is transpose conjugate. So if there were imaginary numbers involved here, say suppose if it was 1 plus I, that would have become 1 minus I, and then we would have taken a transpose. So dagger is basically transpose conjugate. So in this case, EP is therefore 1 over root 2, and then we are doing a kind of transpose is 1 1, and this is 1 1, and this 1 over root 2 would be squared, right? So this is like 1 over 2, and then 1 plus 1, 2, which is 1. Right. So what Rahul is asking is, do we also have this EP, EB equals to 0? So yes, the answer is yes. So basically it can be written, the condition can be written as EI, EJ equals to delta IJ. Fine. Where delta IJ is a Kronecker delta is equals to 1 if I equals to J and is equals to 0 if I is not equal to J. And we will come across scenarios where we'll expand from a basis set which is only having 2 vectors to a scenario where we may have an infinite dimensional basis set, and then these vectors will belong to a kind of space called Hilbert space. Okay, so that would be the quantum mechanical generalization. But in fact, this idea that these are orthogonal and orthonormal, like basically orthonormal. So Rahul, when you say like they're normal, that means they are at 90 degree, or the dot product is 0 of 2 different members of this basis, right? So, and when you say like they are normalized, right? So when they are normalized means that is normal, and orthogonal means when they are perpendicular to each other, or when they are at 90 degrees to each other, or when the dot product is 0, so to say. Because this idea of 90 degree will eventually vanish when you are considering higher dimensional kets, right? And then we will have to go with the definition which is just now written. So this definition would be more relevant, right? So we would be taking dot products, and dot products would be 0 if two vectors are orthogonal to each other, right? And if it is the same vector and you are taking dot product with itself, then it is 1. It means it is normalized.
Yes, sir. Means for lower dimension, means in up to 3 dimension or 4 dimension, we can take up the normality condition.
No, we can go ahead. We can go ahead even up to large, as many high dimensions as possible. But then in such scenarios, we will have to consider a space called Hilbert space, where we can take care of infinite dimensional vectors. Say, for example, we will see, so this is just a teaser for physics students. So suppose we are considering particle in finite well, say 1D case. So this, maybe many of you will be able to understand, like all the physics students will be able to identify. For math students, I need to set some background, so which we will do. So here the potential is infinity. This is V and this is 0. Right. So for this scenario, you know that the wave function can be written as psi is written as root over 2 by, so this is A, right? 2A sine n pi x by A. Right, where this is 0 and this is A. So let's just mark the. Okay, so this kind of a wave function could be written. But from here, how do we go to ket n? This is something that we will see. And this ket n would be an infinite dimensional vector. Okay, so we will see how we will go from the wave function picture to the linear algebra picture. Okay, or basically the function picture to the vector picture. So therefore, like when we solve this problem, for the benefit of math students, we'll actually solve the like the wave function where it has a functional form, that sort of a scenario for the Schrodinger equation. And then, because I am sure not everyone, even from physics, would be able to write the correct ket in the infinite dimensional vector space for this problem, or at least don't have that intuition at the moment. So we will develop that picture and go forward. Is that clear right now?
Yes,
to
sir.
more details. We'll come to more details of this. Okay, I'm just asking about, like, in this specific problem, is there any other issues which were there? Like, there was a particular methodology which we evolved, and then we were able to solve it. Say, for example, in the homework, you also have a problem of this type. And you will have to find the modes of vibration. So accordingly, this would be M1, this would be M2, and accordingly, these would be some Ks. So I can decide to keep this end members as K1 and these as K2 and the central member as K. So like these kind of problems you will have to solve, which I will be sending in the tutorial sheet. Okay, so therefore you will have to really go through whatever method we followed for setting up this equation, right? And follow religiously to find out how. So until unless you understand how this is done, you will not be able to solve the actual problem which would be given in the homework, and vice
Can I
versa.
draw the diagram?
Hello?
Can I draw the diagram, sir? So just wait.
Oh, to draw the, no, I will be sending it as a homework. Don't worry about it. I will be sending it as a homework sheet anyway. Tutorial come homework sheet. Tutorial come assignment sheet. Those who want to draw the diagram can anyway draw it. They can try practicing.
Sir,
Yes.
in this particular problem, you have mentioned non-trivial of x. So kindly please explain that.
Non-trivial x.
Trivial and yeah.
Where? Let us see. Let's go.
Upward portion.
Okay. So, for example, suppose, okay, let's just go to that location. M inverse k of x is omega square x, right? So let me just add one more page to it. So non-trivial v. Right. So what we were talking about are non-trivial x, right? Let's stick to. Hold on. So let's be consistent with the choice of symbols, so that the vector. So we had written M inverse k on x would lead to omega square of x. This is what was said, right? Where M inverse in our case was a matrix, X was a vector, column vector. Okay, so when we say non-trivial, right, we have to understand what is trivial X.
Hello, sir.
Hold on. So the trivial X in this case would be 0, 0. So any solution like 0, 0 will satisfy any complicated equation, like much more complicated M inverse K also, right? Say as soon as we put X equals to 0, 0, any M inverse K would suffice, because this equation will become a trivial equation. That means 0 equals to 0, 0, right? So when we say non-trivial X, it means X is not a null vector. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Somebody was asking some question. Please tell me.
Yes, sir. Sir, I want to say that because we are using non-triviality, because zero solution satisfy every equations, and non-trivial solution give us eigenvalues, and then we can
eigenvectors. Right. True. So trivial solutions means basically a null vector, like or 0, basically 0, right? 0 multiplied to anything is 0, so it will always satisfy the equation, but that's of no use, right? So if we say X is 0, 0, that means there is no motion at all, right? It's the trivial scenario of rest, right? X1 is 0, X2 is 0, so there's no motion, so nothing to be worried about, right? In that sense, like physicists can call it trivial, right? Okay, so I think that is fine. I will just like close this session for all the physics students. So like the 4 math student can hang around for another half an hour, 15 minutes, half an hour. Right, so I think the physics students may, if wish to leave, they want to see what we are doing, that is fine, but then you are not supposed to get bored. Yeah, okay, so Sonu, Rishabh, you can. Rishabh, you were asking some question. Rishabh, you were asking some question.
Yes, sir. Sir, I want to ask about some data visualization, the Dirac delta function. Hello?
Yes.
Sir, Dirac
Who
delta
is
function.
this?
So, sir,
Who is this?
Rishabh.
Rishabh. Tell me. So, Dirac delta function, what did you want to know?
Yes, sir. Sir, I have studied in PD the Dirac delta function, but I have not knowledge about in what is the use of Dirac delta function in physics. So I want to know about what is the use of Dirac delta function in physics.
So this, anyway, I have not started, right? There is a section which is meant for all the students on this. Even physics students are not aware of it completely. Okay, so I will be initiating on it. Yes. And like this Dirac delta functions are very useful, like particularly when you are trying to say evolve the green functions technique for solving differential equations, right? You will find that Dirac delta function comes every now and then, right? Yes. In electrostatics problem, you cannot do without introducing Dirac delta function. There are singularities which you cannot account for. Okay, so there would be some scenarios where kind of these Dirac delta function will come about. At the moment, whatever is done for this class is a simple plot exercise where it was shown that suppose when we are writing the modulo function, we showed that when you are writing f prime, so that is like a Heaviside theta function, and then when you are finding this derivative, that is more like a function which we call as Dirac delta function.
Dirac delta function.
Okay, so that is what only we have introduced till now. We have not done anything more than that. So we will be developing it. We will be developing it for everyone. Okay, and in this case, when we discussed about it in class, this was done without any rigorous proof, right? No proof was required, except that from like very primitive intuition from plotting, right? And talking about slopes, we found that this is indeed true, right? If you recall, we did plot modulo x, right? So this was modulo x, which was f of x equals to modulo x. I think it was too crowded.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know.
So you know that f of x equals to modulo x. So therefore, when we are talking about the slope, like the first derivative is like slope, and we know that the slope on in the second quadrant is -1, right? And the slope on in the first quadrant is +1. So therefore, this curve was like a Heaviside theta function, +1 and -1, right? And this was basically f prime of x. And then when you take a yet higher derivative of this, then we know that
Infinite peak at one point.
Right. So it will actually have a 0 everywhere. 0 everywhere. That there would be some infinite point, like it would be peaked. So it would be like infinity at x equals to 0. Okay, so that's how we saw that by simple argument from plotting or know-how from slopes, we were able to show that indeed f prime x was theta x and f double prime x was delta x for the modulo function. So there was some other question which Rishabh asked. Rishabh, what was the question?
Yes, sir. So, sir, my question in last class, linear algebra, that how do we that equation?
How do we set up this equation, right?
Yeah, set up. Yeah.
So let us take few, various versions of simple harmonic motion. Right, so I am just taking some very primitive background on this, and then let us see. So first of all, what is harmonic motion? Harmonic motion is something which will repeat itself. Okay, and when we are saying simple, like that essentially means that like that has a much deeper meaning. That sort of suggests that here things are within linear regime. Okay, so that means whenever we are say stretching this beyond its, so let me just draw it slightly better. So suppose I give a deflection x, right? So this x is small such that force equals to minus kx. Okay, so force is basically a linear restoring force. Hello, I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Right. Because we just had an electric cut off, but I think my mobile data is working fine. So this is kind of a linear restoring force, and in that situation, we are calling it as a simple right? In that sense, we are saying it is simple, harmonic oscillator. So harmonic motion, right? So SHM, when we say, this is basically simple harmonic motion. So let's call it, let's remove. Okay, on the contrary, say if f was equals to minus kx cube, say k1x cube, then motion is no more SHM. Okay, and what we would come across would actually become anharmonic motion. Okay, so in that sense, have to simple harmonic. So deflections are still small. Okay, and when deflections are small, that is keeping the entire system into linear regime. Okay, and when we say linear regime, only in that scenario linear algebra is applicable. Okay, so that physical systems, they fall in this class of simple harmonic motions, or they can be reduced into a collection of simple harmonic motions. So that is the first point. So to minus kx, x double dot was equals to minus kx, right? X double dot is basically m times x double dot is f, right? That is the mass times second derivative with respect to time, right? It's essentially m times d2x dt2. So if x is displacement, second time derivative is acceleration, and mass into acceleration is force from Newton's law, right? If it was first derivative with respect to x, that would have been simply velocity, and mass times velocity would have been momentum. Okay, so now like for a single mass single like this. Now let's imagine a more complicated scenario which was written there. Although I have discussed this, but let us try to do that again. Let's set up the equation in the most general form, k1, k2, k3. So we have tried to put it in the most general form so that there is no confusion. Because earlier what we were doing is we were trying to, with some case set identical or some masses were same. Like if we see, yeah, so we had the end members as k1 and the central was k2. So let's try to do it in the most general form. And then what will happen? Okay, so what we first of all do is find the equilibrium location, and with respect to that, imagine some deflections x1 and x2. Okay, and then what we are doing is we are only finding what happens to m x1 double dot, m1 x1 double dot. Okay, so in this case what happens is you will have to look at what is really happening to the spring k1 and k2, because this is hanging around in between the two, right? So what is really happening to spring k1? It is being pulled along the, say if we are putting this as the x direction, let's mark that x cap direction properly. So let's consider this is the unit vector along the x direction. So if we are taking the positive x cap direction, so then this k1 is being pulled, and therefore it will have a restoring force which will act along the minus x cap direction. So therefore, if we are writing a vector equation, it would more likely be x cap equals to minus k1 x1 x cap. Okay, that is the contribution from the from the x1 variable.
X1, yeah.
Right. Now we have to imagine what happened. What is the contribution from the spring K2? Right. So in case of K2, what happens is it is being compressed in the positive x cap direction. Okay. Spring K2 is compressed by an amount x1 in the K2 direction. So then what would be the restoring force in minus x cap direction?
Plus K1 X2. K2 X2.
So, so K2
X2 plus
minus K2 X1.
K2 X1. See, K2 X1 would act in which direction? This is something which is the most crucial thing. So you have to imagine that you are trying to compress this, right? So therefore, if you are compressing K2, the restoring force is going to act in the minus x cap direction.
Yes.
Right. So therefore, in this case again, this is going to be minus K2 x cap. Fine. And x2 is the extension in K2. In which direction? X2 is the extension of K2. Right? X2 is the extension of K2. So we are trying to pull it along this direction. The K2 is being pulled along this direction. Fine? Right or wrong?
Right,
Yes,
sir.
Right. Huh? Therefore, overall extension. So overall compression of K2 is equal to how much? X1 was the compression, but expansion, right? So overall compression is only X1 minus X2.
X1
So therefore, in terms of compression, if we write, and accordingly the restoring force in the negative x cap direction, this will become X1 minus X2 of x cap. Fine, that's how we set up the first equation. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Similarly, we can set up the second equation. In that case, it would be m2 x2 double dot x cap, which is in the forward direction, and then K3 would be compressed. So it will have a restoring force which is minus K3 x2 x cap. Right. And then K2 would be pulled by an amount x2, and then would be compressed by an amount x1. So overall pull is going to be x2 minus x1. So the restoring force along minus x direction would be minus of K2 x2 minus x1 of x cap in this case. Okay, so therefore for the second mass, it is going to be m2 x2 dot x cap is minus K3 x2 x cap, right? And then minus of, now if it is being pulled that way, so x2 minus x1 is the pull in the positive x direction, and then this K2 would be there. Okay, so this would remain as the next part. So that's how we set up the equation. Okay, at the moment, therefore you have to understand that we are restricting to simple harmonic motions. We are not considering anharmonic motion. Anharmonic motion has its own set of techniques called perturbation techniques, which people use to solve them, and solve it only under restrictions that the anharmonicity is small. That means in this kind of a scenario, if we are saying minus kx minus k1x, so k1 is much smaller compared to k. In such scenarios, one can apply perturbation technique and solve for anharmonic. But right now we are considering only linear regime, and therefore we are considering only harmonic, simple harmonic motion. And in such scenario, we are able to do the modal analysis. Okay, so whatever we have done was we have separated it into modes and looked at how they behave. Right, what were the corresponding eigenvectors and eigenvalues. But this physical picture of eigenvalues and eigenvectors needs to be developed a little bit further, so that we will do in the next class. Okay, and that will eventually tell us that this problem is useful enough. We will also see how it extends to other branches of physics, and then we will come to realize that diagonalizing a matrix is an important problem, and that will then motivate us to find out different methods of diagonalizing, which can be implemented into computational recipes, right? Because finally we want to evolve things into a recipe where computers could be told to solve for more complicated problems, where analytically we are unable to solve things. Like even the homework problem that I give you, already you will find that finding the eigenvalues and eigenvectors would be already very horrible, very complicated. But let us do that, because that would also give us a freedom into looking at tools in computational physics which we can use to solve this problem. But for that, first we will have to reduce it into a mathematical physics problem. So that's what we'll do. I had asked that in exams, are we going to be basing only on math problem, or the physics problem would also be kind of motivated. So you have to understand that this is a mathematical physics course, and that is the reason why your advisors wanted you to attend it, right? Because they want to make connection to physics problems or connection to real world problems in applied maths when you actually go on to work in kind of maths. So even if it sounds a little difficult in the beginning, please try to hang along, so that you gradually get the feel of the subject, how real world problems are formulated in terms of maths. That's the most important skill which I hope you will have to acquire by the end of this course. Okay, how you can convert real world problems into formal maths problems. Okay, is that clear? Is that not too much to ask for, right? At the moment. Okay. Okay. So fine, if there are no further questions, then we will
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Please tell me.
Sir, in case of higher rank tensor, we have taken an example of ML problem.
Right,
so,
right.
So their tensor, the rank of that tensor was 3. Sir, how we decided?
No, rank. Okay. So let me come back to this. So I think it was here in this problem. No, it was not in this problem. Oh, what happened to this? Maths tutorial problem. How is it separate? How it is cut? Did we cut this? Let me just. Yeah, okay, so it is here. So, okay, so first of all, did you understand that when we were talking about a simple 15 by 15?
Yes, sir.
Right, you understood how it was a rank 2 tensor.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right, it was like a matrix.
Yes, sir.
Right, we had a 255 by 255, no, 15 by 15 grid, and each grid has some value. So we could have represented it as a matrix with 15 by 15 members or numbers to be quoted. Yes. So now in this case, it was simply whether the points at which this digit, which was written as 5, overlapped with the grid, right? And where we had to put some numbers. Fine. Now we can come into a scenario where, like, this image could be a colored image. Okay, so earlier it was simply a weight, right? Simply a weight means whether something is there in the cell or something is not there in the cell. And if it is in the cell, how strong is it between 0 and 255? 255 means very bold and 0 means absent. Okay, because whenever we write something, we can also write it in a very kind of, say, suppose when we write something, right? So we can write in a manner that, okay, so let's not so let's put it in a manner that I can size. So now I have written something which is very thin, right? And I may actually increase the extend something like this, and then maybe more. Some portion is like this, and some portion is very thick. Okay, so you can see this segment which is drawn here inside this, you can see that there are regions which are very thin and regions which are very deep. Okay, so suppose this was only a single color, monochrome, then we could have put a number which is very small, so close to zero, sorry, close to, let's take it here, let's mark it black, so close to 0 here and close to 255 here, right? For this kind of a writing I put a 250, and for this kind of a writing I put 0, right? So much is clear, right?
Yes, sir.
So now suppose we have a colored picture. Okay, colored picture can always, so whenever I am drawing a color, right, I can always write that color in terms of its components. And like physically people have found out that you can represent any color in terms of its index within red, green, green and blue. Okay, so any color can be represented as a linear combination of red, green and blue. Okay, so that is important. So like for example, suppose I am asking a question, what should be the RGB value for yellow? Okay, so suppose I am asking RGB value for yellow. So the RGB value for B, say for example, yellow, like 255, 255, 0. Okay, fine. So this is a typical example. So suppose when we are putting RGB for red, what is your guess?
25500.
RGB for red would be 25500, right? What about dark red? Dark red? Or what about maroon? So for maroon, so it turns out for maroon, the notation is 12800. Okay, so there are different notations from pure like physics inputs, right? Where one
I
is,
can understand 120. What is 120?
where you can
Sir,
understand.
I can't understand. No, sir, I can't understand 128.
128. Okay, why that number? Okay,
Yes,
that
sir.
number is because now your maroon is not really completely red, right? It is different from red. Okay, but it is still a type of red. Okay, so it has been given a kind of different type of a red. Okay, so let me just show you red color code chart. So let me just share that. So you RGB code chart, and you will find that so you will get a rapid table. So can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
So light salmon would be like 255, 160, 122. right? Whereas if we are seeing maroon, maroon is simply 12800, because this is a different shade of red. Fine. And similarly, dark red is 13900, and a red would be 25500. So therefore, like, these are kind of conventions which are eventually within the same color. There are conventions which have been drawn and standardized. So internationally, wherever people are working, if you give them this RGB color, they will give you the shade, right? So suppose if you go to a Asian paint shop in India, or for that matter, maybe some Berger paint in UK, right? As far as you are giving this RGB as 205, 92, 92, it will give you the Indian red, right? If you give this RGB as 240, 128, 128, it will give you the light coral color, and so on. Understood? So that is some kind of notation which we different colors. Okay. So now,
now I got the point that why the rank is 3, because here only 3 colors are independent. That's why.
Right. So therefore, it's 15 by 15 by 3. Excellent. Right. Now, yes, suppose it is not an image, but it is a moving image, like video. Okay. So in that case, what will happen? What would be the rank of the matrix, which is rank of the tensor, which is required to describe the 4. Now suppose if you also add audio channel,
then 5.
5. Yes. Yeah, so it gradually becomes more and more complicated, and this gives, like, this brings the same boring objects like tensor to life. Right now you know why you require a 5th rank tensor.
Yes, sir.
Right, in real life scenario.
Yes, sir.
So this realization is very important, because once you do that, then this like kind of unrolling of tensors to vectors is a technique, and then you can figure out the right protocol. You can set the right protocol in which you will unroll, and then you can save that as a data, and then you can do all kinds of manipulations on that. Say, for example, like when you are training a neural net with this kind of a frame, video frame, right? So you will have to feed in that rank 4 tensor to that neural net in a particular manner. So there would be a recipe for that, and accordingly some linear algebra behind that. Got the point, right? So at the moment we have not gotten deep into it, so we'll gradually get deeper into it. We'll wet our hands gradually. Okay.
Yes.
Fine. So at the moment it is fine, right? You will have to be alive to, or okay to, or open to formulating real world problem into maths problem. That is the most important thing that you have to learn in this course. Okay. And once that is formulated, maybe you know better linear algebra than everyone else in the class. Maybe some of you may know linear algebra, which is like at a much better level than I know, but that is fine. What is the aim of this course is primarily to tell you how to convert physical problems or real world problems into corresponding linear algebra problems. And I would like to stretch your comfort zone to slightly larger than what it is right now. Okay, so that deal is acceptable, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So then Rishabh, Sonu, Ashna and Anuj, I will, I think, close this session.
Sir, one more thing.
Sir, I have one question. Sir, if sir, in the grid we have 2 color, red and green, and third color is combination of this. Then what is the rank?
No. So that is the whole point. No combination. So if you say combination means already RGB.
Okay.
So don't mistake it. So it is like RGB is the basis vectors. Okay. And any vector is a linear combination of them.
Yes.
Got the point, right?
Yes.
But I heard a different voice.
Yes, sir.
with a different question.
Yes, sir. I was
Tell me.
asking about Light Hills book. I could not find that book. If you
Oh,
are
you could
having
not
the
find that
PDF,
book.
can you
Okay, I
please?
will have to find out somewhere. Means I don't know if passing on the soft copy is a good idea, but at least I can point you. Why don't you try to look up this project Gutenberg?
Gutenberg.
So like there is, I think, some project under which lot of books were found. I'm not sure whether that is ethical to obtain it, but I have heard that people are able to access books on that.
Okay, sir. I will
Access
try.
various books. But the best approach would be that if you can get your IIT Patna email ID and
Yes, sir. I
set up
got
a
it.
VPN and try to look for that in IIT Patna e-resources.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so you will be able to find out there.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And let me see, like on WhatsApp, we will discuss further.
Okay,
if there are sections which are relevant, I will kind of scan that and send it. Okay, but transferring entire books, sending entire books is not ethical.
Yes.
So that's the
Please share today's tutorial sheet.
Sure. I will do that.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Let me make it. I will have to take it, right? LaTeX it and convert it. So it involves some amount of work. So once I am able to finish it, then I will be able to send it to you.
Okay, sir. No problem.
Sir, what do you mean by TensorFlow?
Okay, TensorFlow is essentially a software
Used by Google.
Trademark name. Okay, so like Google, I think Google Brain Team. So that's how it is called. Google Brain Team that developed this TensorFlow software. Okay, so it's basically something which will help you to do these linear algebra problems.
Okay.
In the domain of machine learning. Okay, so how do you for that matter analyze video data? So suppose from a video data you have to find out the most important features, right? Say suppose if there is a video which is going on and you need to caption the video, okay, without actually having any more know-how about it. So as a human being we can caption, right? So suppose if the video is of Mount Kailash, right, and we have our favorite or maybe Swiss Alps, okay, and our favorite actors, say Shah Rukh and Kajal, kind of doing a shoot over there, right? So we can very easily caption it that so Shah Rukh and Kajal are doing shooting in Swiss Alps. Fine. So this caption we can write because as humans, our cognitive abilities are much more evolved under normal circumstances. Fine. But suppose this same job has to be done without human intervention. Do you understand the problem now? Okay. So a video is there available, but it has to be captioned. Fine. So under that circumstance, computer has to be taught how to decipher information out of a given video. So it will have to be trained about all mountains. It will gradually kind of have all the data sets accessible, like fed into it, and that cannot be fed by humans again. So for that, they have to basically scrape the web maybe, or they will have to crawl the web, get all the information and train itself, right? And once it trains itself, then it like whatever video you play, it would be able to tell what's really happening. So it will be, for that matter, able to differentiate between a war, right, and a dance. Okay, so both of them may look very similar, right? So suppose there are 10 people in a finite amount of space and their video is being played. So either they are fighting or they are dancing. So that distinction the computer has to do on its own, right? So such kind of complicated problems from computational paradigm, right? Say from computational perspective, like which for ordinary humans is very easy to say, right? But in order to train computer to do that, we need more sophisticated softwares, right? And TensorFlow is one such software which helps you kind of train, means basically do this artificial intelligence business. Is that clear, Ashna? Okay. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I think I will close this session. I'm just expecting like 4 of you to be sharing your problems continuously as the course progresses. Means that is also true for all the other students, but in particular for 4 of you, if you are not able to capture anything which is specific to maths or core to maths, okay. And in the post midsem part, right, I would actually be floating some more interactive activities, right? So there would be some interesting problems which would be assigned, which can be done as a mini project, right? And you can do it either alone or in collaboration with a physics student. So all of you, or in collaboration with another math student. So that way we will try to extend whatever we learn in this course to something more interesting, so that as a PhD course this is more meaningful. Okay, then see you